Paul Heyman just admitted something that could change how we view WWE history forever. This confession is shocking, it's controversial, and it exposes one of the biggest mistakes in wrestling. You need to hear this. What's going on, Suplex Rumble family? Welcome back to the channel where we dig deep into the stories that matter, the confessions that shake the wrestling world, and the truth behind the curtain. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now because what we're about to discuss is absolutely explosive. Paul Heyman, the wise man himself, has made a confession that has the entire wrestling community talking. Let's break this down piece by piece, and trust me, you're going to want to stay until the very end. Before we dive into the confession itself, let's talk about who Paul Heyman really is, because understanding his legacy makes this admission even more powerful. Paul Heyman is not just a manager. He's not just an advocate. He's one of the most brilliant minds in professional wrestling history. This is the man who revolutionized ECW, who created the blueprint for what hardcore wrestling could be, and who discovered and elevated countless superstars who went on to become legends. Think about Heyman's track record for just a moment. He's been the advocate for Brock Lesnar, helping craft one of the most dominant characters in WWE history. He's been the special counsel to Roman Reigns, playing a pivotal role in the Tribal Chief storyline that has defined modern WWE. He's worked with CM Punk during one of the hottest periods in recent wrestling history. But Heyman's influence goes far beyond just the performers he's managed. He's a creative genius who understands psychology, storytelling, and what makes wrestling truly compelling. His promos are masterclasses in building tension, creating anticipation, and making every word count. When Paul Heyman speaks, the wrestling world listens. That's what makes this confession so significant. We're not talking about some random personality making claims for attention. We're talking about someone who's been behind the scenes for decades, who's witnessed the industry from every possible angle, and who has the credibility to make statements that carry real weight. Heyman has always been known for his honesty, sometimes brutally so. He doesn't sugarcoat things. He doesn't play corporate games when he's speaking candidly. And that's exactly what makes this recent admission so jaw-dropping. When someone with Heyman's experience and insight says WWE made a massive mistake, we need to pay attention. Over the years, Heyman has been involved in some of wrestling's most memorable moments. He's been there for the highest highs and the lowest lows. He's seen creative brilliance and catastrophic failures. His perspective is uniquely valuable because he's not just an observer, he's been an active participant in shaping wrestling history. So when Paul Heyman makes a confession, especially one he describes as shameful, it's not hyperbole. It's not clickbait. It's a genuine acknowledgement of something that has clearly been weighing on him, something that speaks to larger issues within the wrestling industry. Alright, let's get to what everyone's here for. What exactly did Paul Heyman confess? What mistake is he talking about? According to recent interviews and statements, Heyman has opened up about decisions made during his time with WWE that he now views differently with the benefit of hindsight. While he's been somewhat cryptic about specific details, the core of his confession centers around talent management, creative decisions, and opportunities that were either missed or mishandled. Heyman has specifically discussed moments where talented performers were overlooked, where creative pitches that could have been revolutionary were rejected, and where the safe choice was made instead of the bold choice. He's talked about the wrestling industry's tendency to play it safe, to stick with established formulas, and to miss out on potential breakout stars because they didn't fit a particular mold. What makes this confession shameful in Heyman's own words is that he was part of the system that allowed these mistakes to happen. He's not just pointing fingers at others, he's including himself in the critique. That takes real courage and self-awareness. It's easy to blame others for mistakes. It's much harder to look in the mirror and acknowledge your own role in missed opportunities. One of the specific areas Heyman has addressed is the treatment of certain wrestlers who had incredible potential but were never given the platform to truly shine. We're talking about performers who had the talent, the charisma, the work ethic, but for whatever reason, whether it was politics, timing, or simply not being the chosen one, never received the sustained push they deserved. Heyman has expressed particular regret about creative directions that were shut down before they could be properly explored. In wrestling, creative momentum is everything. When you have a hot angle, when you have a performer connecting with the audience, you need to strike while the iron is hot. But too often, according to Heyman, corporate concerns, merchandising considerations, or simply creative indecision led to those moments being squandered. He's also been candid about the pressure of working within a corporate structure like WWE. While WWE offers unparalleled resources and exposure, it also comes with restrictions, protocols, and approval processes that can stifle creativity. Heyman has admitted that there were times when he compromised his creative vision to fit within those constraints, and he now questions whether those compromises were worth it. Another layer to this confession involves the changing landscape of professional wrestling. Heyman has watched as other promotions have embraced the very creative freedom and talent diversity that WWE sometimes struggled with. He's seen performers leave WWE and flourish elsewhere, which only reinforces the what-if questions about how things could have been handled differently. What's particularly interesting is Heyman's reflection on the balance between short-term gains and long-term storytelling. WWE has sometimes prioritized immediate ratings pops or social media moments over building sustained, meaningful narratives. Heyman acknowledges being part of that approach and now sees how it may have undermined some of wrestling's core strengths. The shameful aspect, as Heyman frames it, is knowing better but not always acting on that knowledge. It's recognizing that the business side of wrestling sometimes overshadowed the art of wrestling. It's admitting that fear of failure sometimes prevented taking the risks that could have led to the greatest successes. Now let's zoom out and examine what WWE's biggest mistake actually was, based on Heyman's insights and what we've observed as fans and analysts of the business. The biggest mistake, at its core, was underestimating the intelligence and sophistication of the wrestling audience. For years, WWE operated under the assumption that fans wanted simple, straightforward storytelling. Good guys versus bad guys, clear heroes and obvious villains, predictable outcomes that didn't challenge expectations. But wrestling fans have always been more sophisticated than that. They understand psychology. They appreciate nuance. They want complex characters who exist in shades of gray. They want storylines that surprise them, that make them think, that reward long-term viewing with payoffs that feel earned. Heyman himself was a pioneer of this approach with ECW. He understood that fans wanted to feel like they were in on something special, something edgy, something that respected their intelligence. That philosophy created one of the most passionate fan bases in wrestling history, even though ECW had a fraction of WWE's resources. The mistake was compounded by a reluctance to fully invest in certain types of performers. WWE has historically had a very specific vision of what their top stars should look like, how they should talk, and how they should carry themselves. This led to incredibly talented wrestlers being held back simply because they didn't fit that predetermined mold. Think about the wrestlers who were considered too small or not marketable or not the right look. Many of those performers went on to prove, either in WWE eventually or in other promotions, that talent and connection with the audience matter far more than any checklist of physical attributes. Another critical mistake was the overscripting of promos and segments. Wrestling is at its best when it feels organic, when performers are allowed to inject their own personality and natural charisma into their characters. But WWE's corporate structure often led to every word being scripted, every gesture being choreographed, which stripped away the authenticity that makes wrestling compelling. Heyman has been vocal about this issue, noting that some of the greatest promos in wrestling history were performers being themselves, turned up to 11. When you force someone to deliver lines that don't feel natural to them, it comes across as artificial. The audience can feel the difference between genuine emotion and performed obligation. The mistake also extends to how WWE handled competition. Rather than viewing other promotions as opportunities to raise the overall quality of wrestling, there was sometimes a defensive posture that led to reactive rather than proactive creative decisions. The best version of WWE has always been when they're confident, innovative, and setting trends rather than responding to them. From a talent relations perspective, the mistake involved not always recognizing when performers were genuinely unhappy or creatively frustrated until it was too late. Wrestling is a business built on relationships, and maintaining those relationships requires communication, respect, and sometimes flexibility. When talented performers felt they had no voice in their own creative direction, it created resentment and missed opportunities for collaboration. There's also the question of legacy management. WWE has an incredible history and a deep roster of legends, but there were times when nostalgia was prioritized over building new stars. Part-time performers returning to take spots from full-time talent might create short-term excitement, but it can undermine long-term roster development if not balanced properly. Heyman's confession touches on all of these issues because he's been at the intersection of creative and corporate throughout his WWE tenure. He's seen firsthand how decisions that make sense on paper sometimes fail in execution. He's watched as opportunities slipped away because the timing wasn't quite right or because the commitment wasn't fully there. What makes this the biggest mistake is that it's not a single moment or decision, it's a pattern of behavior that accumulated over time. It's the aggregate effect of choosing safety over risk, of prioritizing corporate messaging over organic storytelling, of sometimes losing sight of what made wrestling special in the first place. So what can we learn from Paul Heyman's confession, and more importantly, what does this mean for the future of WWE and professional wrestling as a whole? The first lesson is the importance of creative flexibility and trusting your performers. The most successful angles in wrestling history have often come from giving talented people the freedom to explore their characters, to improvise, to bring their authentic selves to their work. When management and creative work collaboratively with performers rather than dictating every detail, magic can happen. We're actually seeing this lesson being applied in modern WWE. The current creative direction under Triple H's leadership has shown more willingness to let storylines breathe, to allow performers more input, and to build long-term narratives that reward patient viewers. This wasn't happening by accident, it's the result of learning from past mistakes. Another crucial lesson is the value of diversity in your roster and in your presentation. Not every performer needs to fit the same template. Different body types, different styles, different backgrounds. This diversity makes wrestling more interesting and allows more fans to find someone they connect with. The mistake was thinking there's only one way to be a star. Heyman's confession also highlights the importance of listening to your audience without being completely reactionary. Fans often know what they want before creative does, but that doesn't mean you give them everything immediately. It means you pay attention to who's connecting, what's resonating, and being willing to adjust plans when something isn't working or when something unexpected is working better than anticipated. The relationship between short-term booking and long-term storytelling is another